there are facts about well-being.
Sure, let's hear them, man. Line those suckers up.
If you chop off my head, it's in contradiction to my well-being. I mean, but the point...
No, I wasn't willing to grant that, actually.
Okay.
I'm saying that's a metaphysical presupposition. You're just saying I have to accept that.
No, I'm not telling you at all what to accept.
Sure you are. You're saying that your death would be wrong.
I'm trying to explain what my position is.
Okay, but you said that that wouldn't be in accordance with your well-being. Okay, that's a metaphysical statement or philosophical statement. It's not an obvious fact.
That
That's
chopping
not a
off somebody's
fact.
head is contrary to their well-being.
It depends on how you define well-being.
Sure.
Yeah, but it matters.
But if you define well-being as this glass of water, we're no longer talking about the same thing.
Well, you can define well-being. That's fine. That's what I'm waiting for.
This is what I'm... Well,
You can't do it. You can't define well-being. It's
well then
very,
why
very
should I try? I
difficult.
certainly can't do it if you keep telling me I can't do it.
Okay, sorry. Okay, I'll back off. There's a... Go ahead. I'm all ears.
So, the primary objection to mine and Sam's position that keeps coming back is, why should anybody care about well-being? And we both will acknowledge that this is, in fact, a subjective preference. There are people who are going to care about well-being, there are people who aren't. The second objection is that well-being is not clearly defined. Both of us have acknowledged this. It's not as if we're saying we have all the answers to how to go about living a better life. We're just saying that however we're going to define well-being, which is, I say you can start with a couple of foundations. You could start with death is preferable to life, but you don't get very far that way. And
Stop suffering.
Well, no, I'm saying you could start with death is preferable to life, but you don't get very far that way because those
You do. You stop suffering. You just die.
Yes.
Right, so you can start with the presupposition.
Except that when you're dead, you're not being, so there's no well-being.
No, well, that's...
We have no way of confirming that this something mystical or supernatural actually happened. What this is about the language...
Stops people from smoking.
Well, you can stop smoking without any sort of supernatural intervention.
No, not really.
You can't stop smoking without supernatural?
There aren't really any reliable chemical means for inducing smoking cessation. You can use a drug called bupropion. I think that's the one. It's whatever Wellbutrin is.
Is that supernatural?
No, you don't need a supernatural effect, but it doesn't work very well. But if you give people magic mushrooms, psilocybin, and they have a mystical experience, they have about an 85% chance of smoking cessation with one treatment. But that's kind of like evidence, you know. It's kind of like evidence.
It's evidence that you can take mushrooms and increase your chance of quitting smoking. But
no, it's not. It's indication that if you take mushrooms and you have a mystical experience, you'll stop smoking because it doesn't work if you don't have
if you take mushrooms and you have an experience that you describe as mystical, then you'll increase your chance of smoking. But that doesn't tell me whether or not there was something to this notion that they had an experience that was supernatural in any sense.
Well, it's not definitive evidence.
It's not evidence at all.
Oh, sure it is. Because I would like to figure out where I'm wrong, because then I wouldn't have to be wrong anymore, right? And being wrong is actually not a good thing. You fall into a pit if you're wrong.
And this is what I point out in the lecture on skepticism, since you didn't get to see the show, is that being wrong feels exactly like being right. Nobody runs around going, oh, I'm wrong, but I'm going to keep believing this. We all assume that we are correct about a great many things. And it's not so much that being wrong is the thing we're afraid of. I think that being exposed as wrong is the thing we're afraid of.
Well, we're also sometimes afraid of being wrong, because if you're wrong at a deep level, it can really hurt you.
Oh, I agree, it
can really take you apart. And so people don't like to be taken apart. Like if you're wrong about your wife, for example, that tends to be a very painful thing. And that's something that's worth pursuing to try to figure out why that is.
That's why I hide the frying pan.
That should make you popular. Okay, so one of the issues that I have, and you can respond to this, is that let's say the celebrity atheist types, because I actually like that phrase, they don't seem to me to be contending with the real issues. They seem to be going... What are the real issues? Dostoevsky, he's a real issue. Tolstoy, he's a real issue. Carl Jung, 20 books and maybe 15 seminars, he's a real issue. Mircea Eliade. Like, there are some serious heavy hitters in the religious phenomenology domain. And my sense so far, I just finished reading all of Harris's books, for example, he doesn't contend with them at all. And it's like, for me, that's like being an evolutionary biologist and not being aware of Darwin. It's actually a big problem. It's not something you can hand wave away. Jung was a mystic. It's like, sorry. He was about as smart as Friedrich Nietzsche.
I think this gets to basically the same point I was talking about before. The thing that you're objecting to, it seems, is that many of us don't want to address the aspects of religion that you find value in, because we're only focused on, perhaps as I'm talking in the show, from a scientific skepticism perspective of, are there valid and sound arguments that would lead one to conclude that a God exists? My answer to this so far seems to be no. When you say metaphorical substrate, I'm probably just monumentally ignorant, but I really don't think I have a good understanding of what you mean.
Well, there's levels of thought. I mean, every thought structure, let's say, every belief structure is multi-leveled, like a piece of music. And there's the word in a phrase, and then there's the phrase, and then there's the sentence, and then there's the paragraph, and then there's the sequence of paragraphs within which the paragraphs are uttered, and then there's a broader context of interpretation within which all of that is interpreted, and then there's our emotional and motivational similarity, and then there's our embodiment in the world. And all of those things are operative at all times when we're understanding one another. And as you move outside the realm of the linguistic, like the paragraph level, let's say, into the realm of the emotional and motivational and embodied, you also move into the metaphorical. And the metaphorical is structured in a particular way. And this is quite well documented, by the way. I mean, if you look at how the hemispheres interact, so the left hemisphere, broadly speaking, and I'm not oversimplifying this except that we don't have much time, is linguistic. But the linguistic utterances are understood in the context provided more by the right hemisphere, which is nonverbal and which attends to things like the music of language. And so at the bottom of a linguistic structure, there's something that's extra linguistic, and it tends to take form in metaphor and narrative and drama and that sort of thing. And the religious landscape is the narrative, metaphor, drama landscape. And if you disrupt it, then you blow apart the widest possible context within which the specific utterances are rendered comprehensible.
So when you're talking about the broader context, if we lose belief in a God, we lose that metaphorical substrate that is the broader context in which we evaluate these narratives.
Yeah, that really grinds them into our bodies, that makes them things we believe rather than just think.
Sure. So,
see, there's a difference between thinking something and believing it, because to believe it, it has to be thought incarnated in some sense. It has to be embodied. Yeah, well, you can't reduce the world to a set of propositions.
Show me something that is true in the world that is not a proposition. Something that is demonstrably true that I could not put in a proposition.
Oh, that's easy.
Okay.
Sure you want to go there?
I'm not afraid of anything.
Okay. Okay.
I guess this question is mostly for Jordan Peterson. Just to hopefully enlighten a bit more what you mean by God, do you think that if all humanity were to cease to exist, does God still exist?
I don't think I know how to answer that. It's just, the situation is too hypothetical. I mean, I can take a crack at some of it, but so human beings are characterized by consciousness and by self-consciousness, and the latter in particular seems to be something relatively unique. There's some vague evidence for self-consciousness of lower sorts in animals, but it's not very compelling. Some of them can recognize themselves in a mirror, but our self-consciousness is accompanied by elaborated imagistic and linguistic models of ourselves and that have been elaborated over large spans of time. There are lots of elements of being that would disappear if we disappeared. Now, and it isn't even obvious to what extent that's true, right? Because I don't really understand to what degree being itself is dependent on consciousness. Like the classic materialist Enlightenment view, which I would say is basically a 19th century view, something like that, is that if all consciousness was extinguished, the material substrate of the universe would continue unchanged. But I don't really buy that as an argument, because I think that the material substrate, I think that reality is I think that reality is an interaction between what we perceive of as the material substrate and consciousness itself. And so then when you destroy consciousness, you destroy reality. And what that leaves, I don't really understand, because it doesn't have any temporality in any obvious sense. It doesn't have any size in any obvious sense without the introduction of an invisible observer. So lots vanishes without human consciousness and self-consciousness. I don't know how to answer the question, does God vanish? Because that brings us back into the same problem that I was talking about earlier, is that it's not exactly easy to understand what people are talking about when they say God. You know, because when you ask the question, would God disappear? There's an assumption there that whatever God is understandable and boxable, like a simple concept, like a chair, and that we both share the same conception. And, you know, there's endless warnings in deep religious literature against assuming that you understand what that term means, or sometimes even for using the term. So that's the best I'm going to be able to do with that question.